when I grew up, my grandmother had always told us about her father. His name was Nathaniel Schmidt. Now, he had gone on this fantastic adventure with some of his colleagues, and they were Jesse Wrench, Alfred T. Olmsted, and Benson Brush Charles. He was a biblical scholar and a Baptist minister. I decided that this story didn't really completely make sense. There were a lot of missing details. Finally, in 2011, I decided to start researching this event. It took me about 2 years and approximately hundreds of hours of research, combing through archives, books, manuals, personal letters, till I finally pulled it all together. This was the story that I wrote that I thought would best explain what happened on that particular trip. The year was 1904. I was a junior at college at Cornell University. I was 22 years old. I and my cousin Albert, who was a little bit older, a graduate student, and our friend Benson, all went to Jerusalem and the Holy Lands for an entire year. We went with our professor, Nathaniel Schmidt. He was a minister, too. He looked the part with his dark brown beard and mustache. That man could enthrall any crowd. You should have seen the classrooms. They were packed. Standing room only. People were sitting in the windowsills. The public even showed up at these classes. He was brilliant. He knew everything. He was a walking encyclopedia of ancient history, modern history, the Bible, languages, anything to do with the Near East, which helped us greatly many times during our trip. But today, I wanted to tell you about a particular adventure we went on in February of 1905 that year. We had decided to go to the Dead Sea. Now, this is a sea that's between Jordan and Israel, present day. Everyone had told us it was not a good idea to go. It was just dangerous. Our other research colleagues had told us from the other institutes, friends, family, and the travel guides. My favorite was Baedeker's Handbook for Travelers. In that book, he says, the lands between the cultivated areas and the desert proper are filled with marauders who may try to attack you. In the event that this occurs, it is not advisable to kill one of the Arabs, as the entire tribe will seek revenge. We knew it was dangerous, but we had a plan. We were going to rent a boat on the Dead Sea. There were only about 2 of them available. If we saw any trouble, we would just push off into the sea. We would take turns, each of us, 2 hours through the night to keep a lookout. We went to the Dead Sea. We rented a 16-foot rowboat, which the prof called the Dagmar, after his charming little daughter. The boat had to have in it all of the food and water, it was a salt sea, that we needed for 4 men for 3 weeks. Plus our camping materials, supplies, cookware, our blankets. We needed our survey equipment. We had cameras. We had 2 cameras and a tripod. All of our work paraphernalia, reference books, sketchbooks, notebooks, maps. The boat was full. We didn't even have room for a change of clothes. We were going to wear what we had on our backs right now. That's what we'd be sleeping into. But we started our trip. It was a glorious adventure. We first went to the thermal hot springs where Cleopatra and King Herod had bathed. We explored uncharted lands of the Bible. We climbed cliffs and went into caves and climbed right up through the middle of the waterfalls at the great river Arnon. Then, one day, it was my turn to watch the boat, and the others walked down a piece of beach. I missed that day. I'm an archaeologist now. They found Roman ruins of an aqueduct, a sugar mill, and a couple of houses. They were so thrilled, taking photographs and surveying it, making notes, until they noticed that up high on the cliff above them was an Arab looking down at them. Now, of course, they thought, as they saw past the Arab, there was an encampment. This was the kind of savage marauders that they had been warned about might try to kill us. They grabbed all their equipment, ran back to the beach. We threw everything into the boat. But it was the exact wrong time and the wrong location to be getting into the water. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The skies were darkening. A storm was starting to roll in from the northwest. The waves and the winds were coming in, pushing our boat towards the south, and exactly at our south was the Lison Peninsula. Now, the Lison Peninsula is this enormous wall, about 500 feet high, cliff that runs perpendicular into the water and juts out into the Dead Sea for about 5-6 miles. We had nowhere to go. We couldn't go north. We couldn't go south. We had to cross the sea in a storm in the night. And on top of that, our boat was leaking. The day before, the Dagmar had sprung leaks. We were trying desperately to melt some of the asphalt on the beach to fix the holes, but it didn't work. We had to cross the sea because we looked behind us and we saw on that piece of beach we had just been the torchlights of some of the Arabs as they were slowly moving their way up and down the beach. They were obviously looking for us, not suspecting we were out in the sea. We were furiously paddling to keep from being crashed into the cliff, and we made it. It took us 8 hours, bailing water out of the boat, pushing our way towards the western shore. How we got there is beyond me. The prof had an uncanny sense of direction in the pitch dark of night, but we got to the western shore, only to see that there were lights of another camp. We rode another mile or so north to find another encampment. With the last shreds of our strength, we rode yet further until we found an opening where a riverbed was between the cliffs. Not the most ideal place to camp, but we were exhausted. We were wet. It was February. We had no dry clothes to change into. We were hungry. We crashed, but still had to stay post for the night. Wow, how glad we were. By the time the morning came and the sun had come up, we started to gather together our supplies for a breakfast when we saw there was an Arab coming over the beach. He didn't look that scary. He had a smile on his face, and the prof, being the best with dialects of us all, he spoke with them, and the man told us that he was from the Rashidi tribe that lived in Ein-Gedi. But the prof noticed that the man took off to the south when he surmised that Ein-Gedi was up to the north. We didn't pay much attention to it as we were hungry and making our breakfast until about an hour later. 21 swarming men came charging at us over the sand and the rocks. They barely had any clothing on, and each one of them had a knife, a gun, a pistol, a sword, a spear in their hand. We grabbed our things and threw them into the Dagmar, pushed off into the water, but unfortunately it was a bit shallow right there. And the war party came in, crashing at the water at us, grabbed hold of the boat, and pulled us back at gunpoint, taking our belongings out of the boat. Well, of course, we thought this was the end of our days, until the prof did something that startled even us. He put his hand on his hip and he said, "Oh, I can see that you are not from the Rashidi tribe that you say you are, and you do not live in Ein-Gedi, the village. But you are the Jahalan tribe, and you live in Sefasif. It is beyond that precipice, past a large rock encampment." And then he went on to describe their camp. Well, you should have seen those Bedouin step back, and they lowered all of their weapons. Who was this white man who knew not only their language but could speak their dialect perfectly? Who knew who they were, where they lived, and could detail their hideout? Well, the prof continued to talk. And as he did so, he slowly maneuvered himself back to the campfire. He told them about other things he knew about the lands where they lived around the Dead Sea. He told them about the thermal hot springs and me pretending to be Cleopatra in the hot thermal waters. And he told us, and he told them, about places that we hadn't even been yet. The great salt pillar that's called Lot's Wife. The waterfalls that we went up through in the River Arnon. As he did so, the men sat down, one at a time, around that campfire to listen to the prof. Then they teased us about our funny clothes, and truth, we were a pretty bedraggled rot by that point. Our clothes had been so badly ripped and tattered on the sharp rocks, and we had done all our adventuring and climbing. We hadn't hardly a whole piece of cloth between the four of us. The prof laughed heartily, and we took our cue. We laughed too. And then the leader of the tribe said, "You are a master." And the tribesmen started to salute the Prof. They thought he was a great man. And in truth, he was a great man. They said, "You can leave now. We won't harm you." We were so excited. Yes, finally. But no, not the Prof. He put up his hand and said, "Oh, but we are with friends, and we are getting to have new acquaintances. We are enjoying ourselves. We will stay a little while longer." He didn't want to give the impression that we were anxious to leave or anything. He didn't think it would look right. A while later, the tribesmen did put our food and our belongings, well, minus some sugar and some lemons, back in our boat. We got back in the Dagmar, the Prof sitting tall and erect at the stern, rudder in hand, and we were all waving and smiling goodbye. And I thought, they don't look so much like savages. Why, they look like friends. I never saw the Bedouin the same way ever again. I don't imagine that they saw white men quite the same either again. I always thought that there wasn't a person there that day whose life wasn't in some way forever changed. I know mine was.
Oof.
Lovely.
Lovely.
Now you have some photos to share with us?
Yes, I do. This, of course, is Nathaniel Schmidt.
Ah.
He was a little bit younger in this photo, but this is the best one that I've got, that we dug up from the archives.
And that being your great-grandfather.
This being my great-grandfather, yes, yes, of course. And this is to give you a sense of the Arnon, which has a tremendous amount of biblical significance too. The walls and the height of the ravine where this water came down. Yeah. And this is an old picture, and you can see a boat, a rowboat too, kind of making its way up, and they climbed these cliffs. I wanted to show you two more pictures. This one gives you a sense of the sides of the Dead Sea. You can see the scale of it. That little teeny mark there is a boat, is a rowboat next to the enormous cliffs around the Dead Sea. And beneath it is a picture from a book called The Land of Moab by an earlier explorer called Tristram. I love this one because this is a drawing of a siege that happened almost exactly in the location where Nathaniel Schmidt and his party of students were captured. It's a wonderful picture of the Bedouin, and you could see their costuming or lack of.